cost of college between when I went and my father went, it was astronomically more expensive. Now for my children, it will be even more astronomically expensive. 30 years that Susan Collins has been our senator, they have gotten worse. Helped start an organization called NCIS United so that there would be a political group that would be invested electorally to elect Democrats to Congress who would prioritize this issue.
We are pleased to be joined by Jordan Wood, a Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate in Maine, former chief of staff to Katie Porter, and someone who worked within Citizens United, something I'm really excited to talk about as well. But first, I want to say thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I always like to start with this question as a chance for candidates to give their vision or their experience, however you want to take it. But what makes you the right candidate for Maine in 2026?
Yeah, I got into this race because ultimately I have been thinking about why the Democratic Party has lost very consequential elections with so much at stake for our democracy, the future of our country. And Susan Collins was elected when I was in second grade in elementary school. I was born and raised in Lewiston in central Maine. My father's a pastor, my mom a teacher. And when I was born, my mother had to leave the workforce to provide childcare for my twin brother and I. She also had to go back to work when I was in elementary school to provide the family with health care because the church my dad was serving couldn't afford it with the skyrocketing costs. I started work at 16 in construction, worked through high school and college, and was only able to go to college because of need-based student loans. And these driving forces for the cost of living, healthcare, childcare, housing, college, they have not just remained problems for working families the 30 years that Susan Collins has been our senator. They have gotten worse. And I believe they have got to the point where particularly young people, the working poor and working people have started to lose faith and trust in our democratic system, that it is how we bring the change that people need in their lives. And the idea of the American dream, which feels like a tired term, but in a very concrete way, was what I was raised to believe, that if you worked hard and you told the truth, you treat people well, no matter what background you come from, that you can achieve the future that you want in this country. And I think that's all at risk. And it's become at risk because people have not seen it deliver the change that they need. And I think I not only come from the background and have lived through these problems, I understand why they need to be priorities. So I think we don't just have a messaging problem, an agenda problem. It is that we need to provide a very clear choice for voters about whose side we're on, whose side Susan Collins on, and the issues that I will prioritize as the next senator from our state.
And I love that you started there because I wanted to touch on, obviously, a lot of the things having to pertain to Maine and then maybe zooming out to some national issues as well. One of the things I saw when I was looking into Maine was kind of stagnating workforce growth is one of your issues and things like that. So I was curious with, I think, minimum wage set to go up to 15 an hour. What is your plans to not only bring jobs to Maine, but also make it so whether childcare is an issue or what it may be, that people can work those jobs and that those jobs can allow the people to pay their bills?
Yeah. So, I mean, I believe that we are on the verge of a drastic shift in our economy. And I think for people in Maine, we've seen this before with the trade deals of the 90s opening up global and free trade, and jobs left the state, the country, to other places. It devastated mill towns and communities, places that I grew up. And I think we're on the verge of that again with AI. And Maine, I think, though, is uniquely positioned for that change. And I believe, when I talk about childcare, I think I support a plan for universal, affordable access to childcare, because everybody that has a family in this country needs childcare. They need paid paternity leave to have a family. They need to afford housing. And I support a universal healthcare as well, a public option in the marketplace, so that people have more stability. I think if we address these costs of living, it gives people more freedom and autonomy to go in career paths that will have a future. And Maine is one of our top industries is lobstering and fishing. There's a growing industry here around aquaculture and oystering and other things. A computer cannot harvest lobster, cannot haul lobster from the ocean. A computer cannot work an oyster farm. And I think it's important to identify some of these professions, which not only are hard work and command respect and have a future, but they're also occupations that we can directing people to that they can believe in. And I was in seventh grade in Gardner Middle School here in Maine, a public school, when everyone in our class got a computer, and we were told that you just had to learn this machine, that being computer literate was the most important thing you could do because this is where all the jobs would be in the future. And we're seeing now that that's not right. Actually, a lot of the jobs are going to be lost because of this reliance and this idea that you have to find your future occupations through a computer. And I think Maine is just really well positioned with our diverse economy to chart a path forward.
I'm curious what role you think education plays in that, with trade schools, public education, and then in that role, how do you stop Republicans who seemingly want to do away with those things in favor of more privatized education?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we need to have we need to treat kids in high school with an array of options for their future, not just college. And we're seeing the cost of college between when I went and my father went, it was astronomically more expensive. Now for my children, it will be even more astronomically expensive. And that's because there's a scarcity around it, that this is the only path forward. I think that we should be early on in high school be showing young people that there are all these different ways that you can have a future that allows you to live where you want to live and have a family if you want to have a family, but that you're not restricted to just going on to get a bachelor's degree in something, and that's the only avenue of success. And I think that starts with going back and reevaluating schools. It's interesting fact about Maine is actually the earliest vocational schools were actually in Gardner, where I went to middle school, and they're for farming. And so, Maine has actually a rich history of the importance of vocational school and how it can set people up for a successful future.
And I wanted to go back to touch on something you mentioned earlier with universal health care, and then you were also talking about childcare, because I also think those are really important and they play into other things like the economy and jobs. How do you work to make those more accessible for all? Like, more importantly, if you're in the Senate, like, how do you work with Republicans? What's the sell to reach across the aisle and get this to where all Americans can have access to these needed things?
Yeah. I mean, I think that one reason these problems are not being addressed and resolved through Congress is because young people are not represented in the institution. And if you look at the Senate, although 40-year-olds are half of the population now, there's only 2 U.S. senators under the age of 40. I think that when we put more young people into this institution, working across the aisle, I think there are young people who are Republicans as well who understand the childcare crisis, and it's something very different than what our parents experienced. But when you have an institution that only is primarily composed of people who grew up in an America where there was only one parent needed to work, and like my mother left the workforce to provide child, that was normal. We know that that's not the case anymore. And I believe that, and I hope, and I can only say, like, we just have to strive for this, that there will be other young people, I believe, on the other side of the aisle that can help lead on this because they've lived through the crisis as well.
And something that I think could maybe help with that, and where the divide is Citizens United, and kind of how it keeps a certain category of people in office. Could you maybe, for those who don't know what it is, explain why it's bad, and then what we should be doing to address it?
Yeah. So Citizens United is a Supreme Court decision in 2010 that really opened up the floodgates for big money and corporations to spend unlimited amounts of money to influence the outcome of elections. And I graduated college in 2012. I've been active in organizing advocacy since I was in high school, and could see in real time what this decision was doing to our politics and the way that it was empowering special interests that were standing in the way of addressing issues around cost of living, but also around gun safety, climate change, and that it was both eroding the trust that the public had in what policy outcomes were coming from Washington and their elected officials, but it was also just allowing the wealthy to decide these things. So I helped start an organization called End Citizens United so that there would be a political group that would be invested electorally to elect Democrats to Congress who would prioritize this issue and resolve it. And so we started that group in 2015. And one of the things that we led initiative was to get candidates to reject corporate PAC money as a way of proving to voters that I'm not serious about fixing this broken system, that I will, even before we pass this reform, I'll prove to you that I won't be bought by these special interests. And when we started, there was a handful of members of Congress that did that. When I moved on to be a chief of staff for Katie Porter, 20% of the Democrats in Congress had that position. And I think it was a key factor in elevating, at the time was For the People Act, H.R. 1, after Democrats took the majority. The first issue that they tackled was anti-corruption money politics reform. And I think we have helped move the ball forward with politicians in the establishment, that this is an issue that voters understand how it has stopped us from achieving the results that we need for the American people.